Welcome back, guys. Another video. Had this interesting one here about modern feminism ignores working class men. Wanted to do a reaction video to it with you guys. Let's jump in.
I think that if you looked at the average male, female in the United States and looked at the deficits and benefits of the sex, what are the advantages to being a man? What are the disadvantages? It turns out that it's just a complicated mix of.
I would say men are at a tremendous disadvantage when it comes to marriage in terms of divorce, assets. Of course, if you get a prenup and you get some documentation to help yourself if you end up having to go through that situation. But I feel like men are at a tremendous disadvantage when it comes to marriage, when it comes to the house, the assets, what they get when they end up getting divorced, how much they have to pay in child support, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like women are at the advantage in that aspect. Even with the kids, right? Most of the time the woman gets custody of the kids. So my opinion, I think men are at the I don't know what to say. It's like the shit end of the stick, right? That they don't get the good outcome, so to say.
Blessings and burdens. There are ways in which men are privileged and ways in which women are. And it's impossible to say who's better off at this point. And it also depends on the complex set of advantages and burdens, and it varies by social class and so forth. But
I would partially agree with that. I do think women have the advantage of being, a mother, being the one that brings values to the relationships in terms of, in a traditional sense, if they're coming into the relationship and they're beautiful, intelligent, maybe they have a good job, or if they're a stay-at-home mother, they tend to take care of the kids, make sure there's a home meal cooked. If they're a working mother, right, they might do that and also work, depending if their situation allows them to work from home or if they're working from an office. So there's a bunch of different dynamics here, but I think I would agree with that. It really just depends on where you're brought up and kind of, your the values that you have instilled into you as you get older and start to have a family.
it's absurd to simply say the women are so much worse off and the men are. I think it's a central fallacy.
I think I think the opposite. I think men are worse off than women. Typically, right, a guy has to do most of the work in the relationship, has to go out, feed the family, protect, provide, all that stuff in a more traditional sense, right? And the woman does have to, obviously give birth and have kids and whatnot, but I feel as though that men definitely have it harder than women do.
Feminism, they fail to notice, well, let me put it this way. I think too much of the feminist movement focuses on men and women at the very top in professions, like how many CEOs of Fortune 500s. And it's true, there are far more men than women, and I would like to see more.
Skip the line and get right to your destination. That's why you go with Hertz.
Pi is a free browser extension that blocks ads on your favorite sites. You install it once and then you can use the internet freely.
More men who are, senators and just at the top of their profession. But what happens when you look further down in society? And people who are not, in the top 10% in terms of education and elite degrees and so forth. It's a different picture.
Definitely a different picture, especially now, I would say, a lot of men that are growing up, young adults that are growing up nowadays, don't have as good of an education as prior generations, I would say. So men have it tough in that sense, and more women are getting well educated, master's degrees, outpacing men in this aspect, getting better jobs than men are, getting paid higher than men are. And sometimes women want men that are at equal or greater than them in this aspect, right? They want to have a man that, has, if they have a bachelor degree, they want a man that has a bachelor degree. If they're making 100,000, they want their man to make at least 100,000 or more. I'm not saying this is this is true in every scenario, but for most things, right, the woman wants the guy to have these qualities, especially if that's what she's bringing to the table.
Working class men and women, both have burdens and challenges. And one of the special burdens that a working class young man has is he's likely to be less educated. And he's entering an information economy where...
Exactly what I just had pointed out.
I keep saying education has never been more important. And literacy has never been more important. And we have a large cohort of young men coming along who are not going to find a place for themselves in this economy. And so the fact that we have a women's movement that has only looked and primarily focused on some imbalance. To be more specific, if you look at, they'll talk about the wage gap, and that's true. There's a gap, and we want to close it, but I think we have to be honest about it. It's not as extreme as they say, and most of it's explained by the different jobs men and women do, or how many hours you work per week, things like that. But also...
Yeah, I would say that men tend to work harder jobs physically than women do. I would say men have more manual labor jobs, more jobs that kind of pose them at risk, right? If you think about, like, men typically go to war, and men typically are construction workers or police officers or firefighters, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there's obviously women that are mixed into this as well, especially nowadays, where, there's women that take on more masculine traits. You'd see more of that more prevalent nowadays than you did, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think that men should have the harder jobs.
Do most of the dangerous jobs. There's a huge gap in mortality in the workplace. Like, I don't know, something like 5,000 Americans die in the workplace every year. 94% of them are men. So that, that's...
Proving the points here, right? Men have it harder than women typically, right? More men are dying in the workforce than women are. They have harder jobs, harder things that they're doing, more manual labor jobs than women, right? Women are more knowledge workers in that sense, right? They're more working corporate or doing jobs that aren't real physical labor. I guess you could argue like hairdressers, but even then, that's not really, it is manual work, but it's not like super hard manual labor work, right?
Then it goes for, that's mortality, but also it's true for injuries. And men do most of the dangerous, gritty jobs, the jobs where you're outside or pitching tar or on top of roofs or construction. These are largely male undertakings, and
exactly that. Exactly what we just had talked about. She's nailing it right on the head here. No pun intended.
It has to be factored in when you're doing this calculus of well-being. And but we don't do that. We just don't do it. And I'm still a feminist. I believe in equality, but that means you care about men and women. And you don't see, as you mentioned before, you don't see it as a competition where you have to be on one team. Because I think that also if men are in trouble or boys are in trouble, so are women. We're in this together. So
yeah, I think I would agree with that. You're kind of seeing that divergence now with, men that are between the ages of 18 and 29, like 60% of them are single. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. And then also the loneliness epidemic that we're kind of seeing right now. We still also have a huge influx of women that are single as well. So, it is a trickle effect, right? It does affect both genders, not just males.
What we're doing now is so perverse because by not attending to the education of young men, there's going to be a mismatch. People typically marry someone with a similar education. What's going to happen? I mean, we know what's happening right now. A lot of people aren't finding each other. There's a lot of loneliness.
Exactly that. And I think that the reason for this as well is the rise of social media and the rise of these ridiculous standards that people put on each other, not just men and not just females, but also men. Like, everybody wants the ideal person. They want their person to be 6 foot, 100,000 a year, own a home, own a car, have extra money to spend, go on lavish vacations. They want this Instagram highlight reel lifestyle. And that is just not practical, right? And the rise of social media dating apps has definitely ruined this for both genders, I would say. Particularly men, though.
I just don't think the solution is to focus on one sex and not the other.
I want to come back to the relationship issues, the gaps that are widening. But one of the things that it seems like is happening for girls that is maybe more exaggerated in our times right now is what Jonathan Haidt's been noting about the impacts of social media in particular, and that the anxiety.
Man, this video is just hitting on all the points that I'm talking about here. I think it's just because these are the facts, and a lot of these videos have a lot of the same data and points that are being talked about in other videos. So some of the stuff that I'm saying here that's kind of leading into these discussions is kind of funny because I have not watched this video or done a reaction to it yet. So it's funny how this is kind of just leading into the different points that I've been talking about at the beginning of the video. And as the video goes on, the more of these points come up because they're so prevalent, right? It's just, this is the truth.
The self-harm, the general psychological profile for girls seems to be collapsing farther faster than boys in response to their screen time. How have you looked at this? How do you understand what's happening?
Screen time. That's a huge issue. Quick story. I was at a family party, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, and my nephew and some other kids that were at the party were on their phones on TikTok, and they were bragging about how, oh, I have more screen time than you do, blah, 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 blah. And it's just crazy to see how much time these kids spend on TikTok. And I can't sit here and say that I'm not guilty of, doom scrolling or being on social media, but the sheer amount of time that they spend on these different platforms is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I do not think that that is good whatsoever for the development of these young kids' minds as they grow up. I think that there is definitely going to be long-term effects to this. And that's something I guess we're just going to have to wait and see, which is too bad.
To boys and girls here.
At first, I thought that Jonathan Haidt, whom I greatly respect, but at first I thought he was exaggerating and it wasn't that bad. But I'm convinced that something is amiss, and it does seem to correlate with the rise of this times girls spend on social media.
100%. I mean, the amount of time, not just girls that are spending on social media, guys even that aren't spending on social media, right? And they envy these celebrities or these influencers, these people that are showing these lifestyles that aren't true. for most of these people, right? A lot of these times they're renting out these houses, Lambos, blah 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 blah. Yeah, there is obviously the people that are able to afford some of this stuff, but that's just a very very small percentage of the population, and these kids are idealizing these people, and they want to have a significant other that's like that. They want to have all these nice things, and that's just not realistic, right? The expectations are so high, like I had said at the beginning of the video, for people, that it makes people delusional on reality and what the actual facts are, and really what the average person brings to the table.
And I'd be very worried as a parent. I mean, I think people are worried. I will say this. It's another reason that we should attend to gender differences, because there's these disparate impacts. So I think it's clear to me that as we pull back on recess, that had a very bad impact on boys. And schools have, by the way, cut back from, a lot of parents think it was the way.
That is not good. I did not know that. I think that recess is super important. As a kid, you have all this energy built up throughout the day. You need to go outside, run. You need to play basketball. You need to go into the field and kick the soccer ball around, or whatever you like to do on your recess time. But I think them cutting back on that is not good for multiple reasons. Mentally, physically, emotionally, these kids need to get outside, interact with other kids, talk, get a little workout in, get the hormones going, and then get back inside. And then they're kind of refreshed for the day, and they're on to the second half of the day, and they're going to learn all this material. And I guarantee you there's studies out there of research that's probably been done of the before and after of kids going outside. The kids that did go outside and played, came back in, did the work, they probably had better results than the kids that didn't go outside and played and had to do work, right? So I think that that's a trickle effect there, and I think that they should rethink that. And I think that recess is a hugely important part of a kid's upbringing and how they grow into a person and they evolve.
When they were kids, but it's not at all. Some schools don't have it at all.
Crazy.
But with girls, I would think social media, there may be a disparate impact. And Jonathan Haidt has shown
for girls, disparate impact for sure. I would say just like body dysmorphia and what women think they need to look like to be an attractive female to other men. The standards are ridiculously high now because of the rise of social media.
that there is, and it's a reason to be aware, to attend to the differences and how it may affect kids. But I will say one thing. There's one of the reasons teachers might give that they want boys to write about their feelings and they want schools to be more feeling-centered is that they think this is necessary to combat the dangers of, some unhinged masculinity or something. But there was a very interesting study by, I think it was Amanda Rose at the time. She was at University of Pennsylvania. And she interviewed a huge group of adolescent boys and girls and asked them how they felt after if they had a terrible problem, how did they feel after they talked?
Women are they're more emotional than men. So this would make sense to ask girls this question. But men tend to not want to show as much emotion as females do. Just naturally. That's just what it is. So to have men want to come out and be emotional about these problems, I don't think it's the best way.
Did talking about it, talking it through, make them feel better? And she asked this, 14, 15-year-old kids. And the girls said absolutely, they felt better. They were so glad they could talk about it with their mom or their best friend. And the boys, with huge disparity. The boys said, first of all, they thought it was weird. And that was the main.
Yeah, exactly. You could see the guy here, Dave. What's his YouTube? Dad Saves America. You can see him laughing. He understands.
Kept coming up, and a waste of time. And it didn't make them feel better. And we have a lot of evidence that this is a difference. So most people rush in and say, well, that's not good for the boys. But actually what they found was that the boys were a little more stoical and could sort of compartmentalize and move on.
Yep.
And the girls were ruminators. When they had a problem, they wanted to talk about it, and they thought about it, and they ruminated. And these psychologists concluded that maybe girls would be better off if we encouraged a little more stoicism. Rather than spending all our efforts to get the boys to be ruminators and constantly talking about how I felt and what it meant, which most of them don't want to do, and any mother of a boy.
Naturally. I mean, come on.
Or father might know about this. But what if it turns out that that's adaptive, and that what the boys are doing is maybe helpful to them? And maybe we've, in this highly therapeutic society where we're so focused on people's emotional states and things, maybe girls have a tendency for that. Maybe we've exaggerated it, and now they have to cope with all of the highs and lows that can be brought on by this social media and what people are saying about you, what's going on, all that. It may be just impossible. So it just may be unfortunate that all of these things have come into play at once, and the sensitivity of girls, which we have encouraged, is helping, adding to the misery.
Definitely. And, I think with women on social media and people maybe posting bad comments or saying you're ugly or you're fat or you don't look good, blah, 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 blah. You put yourself out there on these platforms and you're going to have some really disgusting people on there making comments, etc., etc. And at the end of the day, as you get older, you realize that none of that matters, right? And you need to kind of just do what's best for yourself and do what you think is right for yourself and not what others think is right for you. But as a 14, 15, 16-year-old female on social media, right? Their frontal lobe isn't even developed, not even close to developed yet. So them to rationalize these different things is hard, and it's definitely taken an emotional toll on women as a whole as they grow up. So I think, the way around that obviously is to limit the social media exposure and maybe not let younger kids on these apps until maybe they're 18 or 21. Like maybe like how we did it with smoking and drinking, right? Like maybe there should be regulations on that.
Strikes me that there's something kind of perverse at play with this focus on therapy and on talking about and ruminating on problems, partly because it seems to me like when you conjure up the feeling of something that was painful, you essentially re-injure yourself to some extent. To some extent, you relive the experience. And it seems like there's a feedback loop there that is not fundamentally healing, but is actually sort of a multi-layered traumatizing that goes on.
Everything is classified as traumatic that used to be just Yeah, well, first of all, if you think back to how children grew up in the previous generations, I mean, life was a lot harder. And I don't wish a hard life on my child.
Yeah, you think about a kid back in, 1940, 1930, 1940, 1950, right? Out on the farm working, farming, all those different things, going to milk the cows, you had to go out and, whatever you had to do, right? Definitely a lot harder back then than it is today, for men and women both. Today we have it easy. You can order food to your door. You don't even have to leave your house anymore. You could order everything online to your doorstep, and it'll be there in a day or less than a day if you want it to be, right? So the amount of friction to do things is a lot less than it was back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
I'm guilty of being a helicopter parent as much as anyone else. It's just, it's impossible not to. But on the other hand, I recognize that my parents were more aloof. They were too busy with life to, and challenges and 3 kids, and they were very young. And they, basically they just didn't pay that much attention to us until, you had to be home at 9 in the summer before dark, I mean. And I don't ever remember them calling up a teacher or anything. I didn't want them to have anything to do with my school. And now parents are so involved, and the child, I'm worried that they're really not learning basic skills of just how to deal with the challenge of life. If you talk.
Yeah, because kids can't even focus for more than 2 seconds anymore because everything is so instantaneous that everybody wants instant gratification, instant success, instant everything. So the ability to focus on one thing for an extended period of time is like obsolete. You can't even get a kid to sit down and focus in class without him fidgeting or wanting to swipe on his phone through TikTok or have him thinking about other things that he wants to do throughout the day, right? So it's definitely a lot harder for kids nowadays to learn in general.
Psychologists now, and they've had to increase their numbers at colleges. Practically all the kids have a diagnosis, and they're coming for they can't solve the problem. If they don't like their roommate or something, they don't seem to have the skills to deal with adversity. And so that's something else that, and I think Abigail's book was a great reminder to parents that there might be a better way than treating everything as an occasion for examining your inner feelings. Sometimes it's better just to move on. And that goes against the ethos, but it may explain why boys are having a less difficult time with social media. They have another
That's interesting.
problem with social media. They have a problem with getting addicted with the video games, but even that.
Video games, porn, you name it, right? Like, I mean, there's obviously other issues that guys have problems with. Curious to see what some of the comments are saying down here. For a group of women who claim men are useless, I am an aircraft mechanic. I am a female. I am outnumbered at least 50-1. For sure, absolutely. In my current role, there is 12 planes a night with the required maintenance and paperwork. I cannot do it all by myself, so I get earbuds, but they're already quite complaining. I work with awesome hard workers and fun to be around. Thumbs up to that. Feminism has not ignored a working class man who specifically socially feminism, life, how ironic. Interesting.
Exaggerated. A lot of those boys and I spent a lot of time with that literature looking at boys and their video games, and for years they tried to show, well, it's making them more.
Well, before she jumps into this, I will just say that video games were like a tremendously positive impact on my life from growing up. I'm 31, so growing up playing RuneScape, right? you have to build a character, and you have to build up skills, and you have to learn these different tasks, and you have to do these different quests, and you have to learn how to level up your character and how to acquire resources, right? Like, that's a tremendous life. It translates to different life skills, right? Being able to manage money in the virtual world and make sure that you have enough to buy the things that you need, right? Or even playing, other types of games like Halo 3 or like Call of Duty, right? It requires a certain amount of skill and intellect to play these games effectively. And I think that video games aren't a bad thing, just like anything else, right? Like everything in moderation. But I think that they definitely had a great impact on my future success in life. If I did not play video games, I would really be curious to see where I would have been at versus, obviously where I'm at now. So interesting she's bringing this up.
That's not been proved. The most violent games of all were, coming out of Japan, and
GTA.
they didn't have high crime rates and things. I mean, they haven't been able to find a correlation. But they said, well, it's wasting their time. But a lot of those boys are learning a lot of skills. They became very interested in the technique.
Exactly that.
And the tactics, they became early adapters of all sorts of technology, and they're off, majoring in engineering,
Yep.
that sort of thing. So I'm not sure that that's as harmful as people think. But I do wonder if we haven't made girls more vulnerable by pushing this culture of always being this kind of confessional and feeling centered, and identifying everything as traumatic, and getting all excited about any adversity in her life, rather than teaching young women to be a little tougher.
If you like this clip,
Interesting. This is a good video. I hope you enjoyed the reaction to it. I definitely enjoyed it myself. I want to do more of these videos in the future, so let me know in the comment section below if you enjoyed this style of video. But yeah, no, I think that society as a whole today is just, we are at the crossroads right now where this new AI generation is going to be coming up, and like my generation, we grew up without smartphones, but we had video games, but we still played outside. You see this divergence here where now kids aren't really playing outside, and they're kind of just staying inside and playing video games or online or in virtual worlds, and we're having this lack of social connection where kids are playing with each other and having social connections and building friendships. So it's going to be interesting to see like how this plays out over the next 20, 30, 40 years. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.